Hey guys, my name is Abhishek and welcome back again to MBBS Treasure channel. Today we are going to discuss about the types of cell death or the next topic of the pathomorphology after the types of cell injury. I have already discussed about the types of cell injury, that is reversible and irreversible kind of cell injury, how it occurs and why does it occur. So if you haven't watched that videos, you can go to my playlist of the pathomorphology and you can find that and get clear about that reversible and irreversible type of cell injury. We are going to discuss two types of death, that is necrosis and apoptosis, and we are also going to discuss the types of processes or mechanisms of death through the differences or by differentiating the types of cell death. So without wasting time, let's begin our today's topic. So we know there are two kinds of cell death occurring in a cell, that is necrosis and apoptosis. When the cell death occur, actually, the first question comes here: when does the cell death occurs? Cell death occurs when there will be injury to the cell, and the types of injury are of two kinds. First one is reversible kind of injury, and the second one is irreversible kind of cell injury. In the reversible, if the cell can revert back again to its normal metabolic activity, that will be called as a reversible kind of cell injury. And in case of irreversible cell injury, the cell cannot revert back again to its normal metabolic activity. After the irreversible phase of the cell, the next step is the cell death, and that conditions of the cell can be described in two formats. That first one is necrosis and apoptosis type of cell death. So we will discuss this necrosis and apoptosis by dividing or by differentiating in between the two processes. Firstly, what does occur? What is the main thing that occurs in necrosis and what is the main thing that occurs in apoptosis is that the types of cell death, whether it is planned cell death or whether it is unplanned cell death. In necrosis, it is totally unplanned. It comes accidentally, the pathological stimuli suddenly attacks the cell and that causes the necrosis or that causes the cell death. Then we will call it as unprogrammed or accidental or not planned cell death. And if the cell knows itself or the cell intend itself to die, then it can be called as programmed planned cell death. That means the cell itself is planning to die. Next is necrosis. In the necrosis, the next will be energy independent process. Why it is energy independent process? Because when the stimuli is coming, the cell does not know that yes, the pathological stimuli is coming and it is going to affect the cell. So without the knowledge of the cell, there will be lysis or death of the cell. So it is energy independent process or passive process of cell death. Whereas in case of apoptosis, it is active process. It means it requires energy dependent death of the cell, because the cell knows itself that the cell has no more function in the tissue and the cell requires to die. So through the lysis process or through releasing the hydrolytic enzymes, there will be the death of the cell, and that release of that hydrolytic enzymes will be done through the planning process of the cell. So it is energy dependent. It requires energy to die. Next is the in case of necrosis, the stimuli will be non-physiological or pathological stimuli. Obviously, if the cell does not know that something is going to happen or something is going to attack on the cell, so obviously it is an external or pathological stimuli, and that pathological stimuli can be of two types: exogenous and endogenous. In apoptosis, it is completely physiological. It means if the cell, inside the cell, there will be any kind of disturbance of metabolic activities or any kind of unnecessary required, not required processes will be appearing inside the cell, then it will be called physiological stimuli that will stimulate the cell to occur the lysis process. So it is completely physiological stimuli that will be affecting or causing the plant cell death. So next we are going to discuss about the mechanism of cell death. In mechanism of cell death, as we know, there are two kinds of cell death, necrosis and apoptosis. Obviously, there will be two processes occurring, distinct processes occurring through the cell death. What happens in necrosis? First of all, if this is a normal cell and here is the nucleus present and these are the organelles surrounding the nucleus that are present in the cytoplasm. What happened next is that there will be causing inflammation marked by swelling of the cell, plus there will be bleeding structures. Bleeding structures means there will be bubble-like structures forming outside the cell membrane or forming in the cell membrane, and then there will be inflammation. There will be the cell will be completely swelled up. There will be increase in the size of the cell. Okay, first thing it occurs of the this is the marked feature of the necrosis process in which there will be swelling of the cell. What happens next is that this nucleus process, the nucleus process undergoes certain kind of changes. That is, first of all, it goes pycnosis, then occurs karyolysis, and then occurs the karyolysis. What do I mean by these three terms? First comes the pycnosis. Pycnosis means if this is the nucleus, this part I am showing, if this is a nucleus, the nuclear materials are present in a completely scattered manner. What will happen? The nuclear material will condensed to a region. Point-like structures or point-like or dot-like structures will be formed inside the nucleus or nucleoplasm. This will be known as pycnosis, condensation of nucleus. Then what will happen? This karyolysis will occur. It means there will be fragmentation of this condensed nucleus. Fragmentation means there will be little breakdown of this condensed nucleus. Breakdown. This is known as karyolysis. Then the final stage what will happen, that is called karyolysis. In karyolysis, what will happen, this small amount of breakdown will lead to complete destruction of the nuclear material. Okay, the nuclear material that has destructed into small fragments, there will be destruction of that small fragments into more and more little fragments, complete destruction of the nuclear content. That three processes occurs in the necrosis condition, and then finally what will happen, the cell membrane gets disrupted. This was the nucleus, so here it was the cell. There will be disruption of the nuclear membrane. How does it will occur? Because there will be release of the nuclear protein or nuclear content of the nucleoplasm that will disrupt the cellular membrane. If there will be disruption of the cellular membrane, then what will occur? The cell will loses integrity. There will be different steps and structure of the cell, and finally this cell will lose all of its component of the cytoplasm, and then it will be the complete lysis of the cell. Finally, this cell will be attacked by the macrophage. Okay, the macrophage will engulf the small particles of the cell that are formed after the lysis of the cell. So this was the total process what will be occurring in the necrosis condition. Now we will talk about the apoptosis condition. In apoptosis, what does happen? The apoptosis is marked by non-inflammation and shrinkage of the cell. It is non-inflammation and shrinkage of the cell. If this was the size of the cell in previous condition, there will be shrinkage of the cell. The size of the cell will decrease. Okay, and obviously it contains the nucleus as it is, and also there will be formation of this blebbing condition, irregular structure of the cell membrane. And then what will happen, there will be pycnosis and karyolysis, but no karyolysis. There will be no complete destruction of the nuclear membrane. It means there will be only fragmentation of the nuclear membrane. Nuclear component. If this was the nuclear component, there will be only fragmentation of this nuclear membrane, nuclear component. So first condensation, that is pycnosis, then karyolysis, the only fragmentation of the nuclear content. Then what will happen in the next, the cell membrane remains intact. In this condition, what happens, the outside cell membrane is normal as it is. Obviously this will be small, but I have magnified this structure. The outside cell membrane will be remain as it is. So there will be no lysis or no disruption of the cellular membrane. And finally what will happen, also one thing I forgot to mention is that there will be blebbing like structures, and that blebbing will lead to formation of small bodies which are called as apoptotic bodies, and inside these apoptotic bodies it contains some amount of cytoplasmic material or organelles, and that organelles are functional organelles. Okay, there will be formation of small apoptotic bodies. These are known as small apoptotic bodies, and inside it contains the organelles that are still functional. It remains functional, and finally they will be engulfed by the macrophage. Okay, so this was the mechanism of the apoptosis that we read. Okay, so this was the difference that we should know before learning what are the mechanisms of the necrosis and apoptosis. Okay, thank you.